My daughter-in-law smiled at me across the candlelight, sliding a bowl of homemade sweet potato pie toward my place setting. It was my favorite dessert, a recipe passed down from my great-grandmother, but as she urged me to take the first bite, I realized something terrifying. That bowl was laced with enough high blood pressure medication to stop the heart of a horse, let alone a 70-year-old man. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. Instead, I reached under the tablecloth, texted 911, and prepared to give the performance of a lifetime. My name is Cyrus Blackwood. I am 70 years old, and for the last 40 years I have let the world believe I am just a retired HVAC contractor living on a modest pension. I drive a 10-year-old Ford truck. I wear flannel shirts from Costco. I live in the same 3-bedroom house in a quiet working-class neighborhood in Atlanta, where I raised my son. What nobody knows, not even my own flesh and blood, is that those dusty years of crawling through attics and fixing furnaces were just the beginning. I took every dime of profit and bought land when the market crashed. I renovated apartment complexes when nobody else would touch them. Today, I own a portfolio of commercial real estate worth north of $50 million, but I kept it quiet. I wanted my son Tyson to build his own character, not live in the shadow of my checkbook. I thought I was teaching him value. Instead, it seems I only taught him resentment. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you are going to want to see how this ends. The nightmare began 3 hours earlier. It was Christmas Eve, and the air inside Tyson's oversized mortgage-to-the-hilt suburban house was stifling. The heating was cranked up too high, likely to compensate for the drafty windows they could not afford to fix. My son Tyson sat at the head of the table, looking like a man shrinking inside his own skin. At 32, he still had the soft eyes of the boy I used to take fishing, but they were clouded now, darting nervously between me and his wife Tiffany. Tiffany. She sat there in a dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her nails manicured into sharp red talons. She had always looked at me with a specific kind of expression, a mix of boredom and mild disgust, as if I were a stain on her pristine white carpet that she could not quite scrub out. We had just finished opening gifts. I had handed Tyson a small, heavy envelope. Inside was a savings bond, a classic stable investment I had purchased for him 20 years ago, now matured to a significant sum. It was not flashy, but it was real money. It was security. Tiffany had snatched the envelope from his hands before he could even thank me. She ripped it open, stared at the paper, and let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Seriously, Cyrus," she said, tossing the bond onto the table like it was a piece of junk mail. "A savings bond. What is this? 1950? We are drowning in credit card bills for this renovation, and you give us paper money that we have to go to a bank to cash. We needed cash, or maybe that Rolex Tyson has been eyeing. You know, something that actually shows you care about your son's status." Tyson looked down at his plate. "Tiffany, it is a generous gift," he mumbled, but his voice was so quiet it barely registered. "Generous?" she scoffed, pouring herself another glass of wine. "It is cheap. Just like that truck outside, just like those boots you refuse to replace, you are sitting on a paid-off house in a gentrifying neighborhood, Cyrus. You could sell that place, move into a condo, and give us the equity. But no, you would rather hoard it. You are selfish. That is what you are." I sat there feeling the familiar ache in my chest. It wasn't a heart condition. It was heartbreak. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me. Waiting for him to say, "Dad worked hard for that house. Dad put me through college. Dad is a good man." But Tyson said nothing. He just took a long swallow of his drink and avoided my eyes. That is when the dizziness hit me. It came on sudden and sharp, a wave of nausea that made the room tilt. I had eaten a few spoonfuls of the lobster bisque Tiffany had served earlier. It tasted overly salty, heavy on the spices. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning ashy against the white tablecloth. "Are you okay, Dad?" Tyson asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I just need some water," I managed to say, pushing my chair back. The wood scraped loudly against the floor. "I need to clear my head." "Sit down, Cyrus," Tiffany said, her voice changing instantly from shrill to sickly sweet. "I will get it for you. Rest. You look terrible." "No," I said, forcing myself to stand. My legs felt like lead. "I need to walk a bit. I will get it." I stumbled out of the dining room, leaning heavily on the wall. The hallway was lined with photos of Tiffany and Tyson on vacations I knew they could not afford. Cabo, Paris, Aspen. Not a single photo of me. Not a single photo of my late wife, Beatrice. It was a shrine to their vanity. I made my way toward the kitchen, intending to get a glass of cold water from the tap. The door was slightly ajar. As I approached, I heard the clinking of ceramic and hushed, frantic whispering. I stopped. Decades of working on construction sites had taught me to be quiet when I needed to be. I pressed my back against the wall, peering through the crack in the door hinge. What I saw froze the blood in my veins. Tiffany was standing at the marble island. In front of her was the large ceramic bowl of sweet potato pie filling. Beside it lay a mortar and pestle and a scattering of blue pills. I recognized them instantly. They were my pills, my high-dosage beta blockers that I kept in my coat pocket for my arrhythmia. She was grinding them into a fine blue powder. "How many did you use?" Tyson whispered. He was standing by the refrigerator, his phone in his hand, his face pale and sweaty. "All of them," Tiffany hissed, dumping the powder into the orange mixture. She grabbed a spoon and began to stir it vigorously. The blue disappeared into the spices and the yam. "Is that too much?" Tyson asked, scrolling frantically on his phone. "Google says an overdose can cause cardiac arrest within an hour. What if it happens too fast? What if the paramedics see the symptoms?" "Stop being such a coward," she snapped. "He is old. He has a history of heart problems. Nobody is going to question it if his heart just gives out after a heavy Christmas meal. It happens all the time. We call 911, we cry, we tell them he complained of chest pains all night. It is airtight. But murder." Tiff Tyson's voice cracked. "He is my dad. He is an obstacle," she said, slamming the spoon down on the counter. She turned to face him, her eyes manic and wide. "Do you want to lose this house? Do you want the guys from Viper Capital coming back to break your legs over that gambling debt? We need his life insurance. We need the equity in his house, and we need it now. Not in 10 years when he finally kicks the bucket naturally. This is mercy, Tyson. We are putting him out of his misery and saving ourselves." Tyson lowered his phone. He looked at the floor, then back at the pie. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, just make sure he eats it all." I felt bile rise in my throat. My own son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had held when he cried over his first heartbreak. He was not just letting this happen. He was researching the timeline. He was complicit. The dizziness I had felt earlier vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The adrenaline of survival flooded my system. I realized then that the soup had likely just been a test, a primer. The main event was the pie. I backed away from the door, moving silently across the plush carpet. I retreated into the living room, sitting in the armchair furthest from the kitchen. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a rage so profound it felt like burning coal in my gut. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I did not dial the police immediately. I needed to be smarter than that. If I called the police now, they would claim I was confused senile. They would hide the pills. It would be my word against theirs. I needed undeniable proof. I needed a witness. I opened my text messages and typed 2 messages. The first was to 911. I kept it simple. Possible poisoning in progress. 70-year-old male. Address is 422 Oak Creek Lane. Suspects are preparing lethal dose in food. Send help, but silent approach. The second message was to Reggie King. Reggie was not just my lawyer. He was my brother-in-arms, a man I had served with in Vietnam 50 years ago. He was the only person who knew the true extent of my empire, and the only man I trusted with my life. Code Omega, I typed. Activate the protocol. They just crossed the line. Bring the team to the hospital. I hit send and deleted the messages from the chat history. I slipped the phone back into my pocket just as the kitchen door swung open. Tiffany walked out carrying the bowl of pie with a smile that could have charmed a snake. Tyson followed her carrying dessert plates, looking like he was walking to the gallows. "Dad, you are here," Tiffany chirped. "I brought you the water, but I also thought we should just get straight to dessert. It is your favorite." She set the bowl down on the coffee table in front of me. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg wafted up, masking the scent of betrayal. "Eat up, Cyrus," she said. "It is to die for." I looked at the bowl. I looked at my son. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I was not going to eat that pie. but I was going to make them believe their plan had worked just long enough to tighten the noose around their own necks. I clutched my chest, let out a gasp, and prepared to die. Tiffany placed the ceramic bowl on the placemat with a delicate clink that sounded far too loud in the silent dining room. She smoothed her dress and took a step back, clasping her hands together under her chin in a pose of exaggerated anticipation. The steam rising from the bowl carried the rich, earthy scent of sweet potatoes, cinnamon, and nutmeg, a smell that usually transported me back to my mother's kitchen in Savannah. Tonight, however, it smelled like a chemical fire masked by sugar. I looked down at the orange mash. It was smooth, creamy, and perfectly innocent in appearance. There were no visible blue specks. She had done a thorough job with the mortar and pestle. "Go on," Cyrus Tiffany urged, her voice tight with a forced brightness. "It is best when it is piping hot. I know how much you love it." I looked up at her. Her eyes were wide fixed on me with a predatory intensity. She was not blinking enough. Behind her, Tyson stood near the archway to the kitchen, wringing his hands. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill I felt radiating from the table. He could not even look at the bowl. He was staring at his shoes, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I picked up my spoon. The silver felt cold and heavy in my hand, like a weapon I did not want to use. I dipped it into the mixture, swirling it slowly. The consistency was thick. I lifted a generous scoop, letting the steam waft toward my face. I watched them watch me. Tiffany leaned forward slightly, her breath held. Tyson finally looked up. His eyes locked on the spoon, hovering inches from my lips. I could see the terror in his face. It was not the terror of losing his father. It was the terror of committing the act. He was weak. He had always been weak. I had tried to toughen him up, taking him to job sites, showing him how to negotiate contracts, but he had always preferred the easy route, and now the easy route was murder. "Is something wrong?" Dad Tyson asked, his voice cracking. "You are just staring at it. I am just savoring the aroma." I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my gut. "It smells different this year. Did you change the recipe, Tiffany?" She flinched a microscopic jerk of her head. "Just a dash of extra clove," she said quickly, "and maybe a secret ingredient. You know I like to experiment. Just try it, please." I brought the spoon closer to my mouth. I could see the muscles in her neck tense. She was practically vibrating with the need for me to swallow that poison. I held the spoon there for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I let the silence stretch until it was thin and brittle. Then I dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly against the rim of the bowl, splashing a small dollop of the orange mixture onto the white tablecloth. I let out a sharp, guttural gasp. My hand flew to my chest, clutching the fabric of my flannel shirt. I squeezed my eyes shut and let out a low groan of pain. Cyrus Tiffany shrieked, but she did not move toward me. I convulsed in the chair, throwing my head back. I knocked my water glass over with my other hand, sending ice and water cascading across the table. I let my body go limp and slid sideways, crashing heavily onto the hardwood floor. Dad Tyson yelled. I lay on the floor, my face pressed against the cold wood. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, my breathing ragged and loud. I needed to sell this. I needed them to believe I was dying, but I also needed to see what they would do. I heard Tyson running toward me, his footsteps heavy and frantic. He dropped to his knees beside me. Dad, can you hear me? Don't touch him, Tiffany hissed. Her voice was right above me. She must have moved closer. What is happening? Tyson, panic was rising. He has not even eaten the pie yet. Look at the bowl, Tiffany. It is full. He did not take a single bite. I lay there, letting out a wheezing breath, my body twitching sporadically. This was the moment. This was the confirmation. A loving son would be calling 911. A loving daughter-in-law would be checking my pulse. But they were not doing that. He did not eat it, Tiffany whispered, and her voice was trembling with a different kind of fear now. If he dies of a natural heart attack right now, that is fine. That is lucky. But what if he does not die? What if the paramedics come and find the pills in the pie? We have to get rid of it, Tyson said. His voice was frantic. Flush it. Flush it down the disposal. No, you idiot, Tiffany snapped. If we dump it now and he survives, he will wonder why we threw away his dinner. We have to hide it. Put it in the fridge. No, put it in the trash under the other garbage. Quickly. I heard the clatter of the bowl being snatched from the table. I heard footsteps retreating into the kitchen. They were scrambling. They were terrified. Not because I was in pain, not because I was dying on their floor, but because their weapon was still loaded and sitting on the dining room table. Call 911. Tyson Tiffany yelled from the kitchen. You have to call them now. We cannot wait too long or it looks suspicious. Tell them he collapsed. Tell them he has a heart condition." I heard Tyson fumbling with his phone. I let out another long, rattling groan, arching my back. "I am calling," Tyson stammered. "Yes. 911. My dad. He collapsed. I think it is a heart attack. He is shaking. Please hurry." 422. Oak Creek Lane. I lay there and listened to my son perform his own lie. He sounded convincing. He sounded like a grieving, panicked son. It broke the last fragment of hope I had held on to. He was truly gone. The boy I raised was dead. The man standing above me was a stranger who viewed my life as a transaction. Minutes stretched into eternity. I kept up the act, my breathing shallow, my body limp. Tiffany came back into the room. I could hear her pacing. "Why are they not here yet?" she muttered. "If he wakes up Tyson, if he wakes up and talks, we are in trouble. He was acting weird before dinner. Do you think he knew?" "He could not know," Tyson whispered. "How could he know? He is just old. His heart just gave out. It is a coincidence. A lucky coincidence. Lucky. They called my death lucky." Then the sirens cut through the night. The wail grew louder and louder, accompanied by the flashing of red and blue lights that danced across my closed eyelids. The cavalry had arrived. I heard the heavy thud of boots on the porch, the pounding on the front door. In here, Tiffany screamed, her voice shifting instantly into hysterical grief. "Please help him. He just fell." The front door burst open. I heard the rush of movement, the crackle of radios, the smell of antiseptic and rain entering the house. "Sir, can you hear me?" a deep voice asked. Hands were on me, checking my pulse, lifting my eyelids. I let my eyes flutter open just a slit. I saw a blur of uniforms. I saw Tyson and Tiffany standing back, clutching each other, fake tears streaming down Tiffany's face. But the face hovering directly above mine was one I was looking for. It was a large man with a scar above his left eyebrow. He wore the standard EMT uniform, but there was a small, discreet pin on his collar, a gold lion, the insignia of Reggie's private security firm. This was the man. He leaned in close, pretending to check my breathing. His lips barely moved. "Omega Protocol," he whispered so low that only I could hear it. "Reggie sent me. You are safe, Mr. Blackwood." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "We have a pulse, but it is erratic," the medic shouted, playing his part perfectly. "We need to move him. Now. Get the stretcher." The team moved with military precision. I was lifted onto the gurney straps secured across my chest. "What is happening? Is he going to make it?" Tyson asked, stepping forward. "We are taking him to St. Jude's," the medic said, firmly blocking Tyson's path with his shoulder. "You can follow in your car, but we need to stabilize him and transport. Do not delay us." "Wait," Tiffany cried out. "I need to get his insurance card. I need to." "We have everything we need on file," the medic interrupted. "We are moving." They wheeled me out into the cool night air. As they lifted the stretcher into the back of the ambulance, I caught one last glimpse of my son and his wife standing in the doorway of that expensive house I had paid for. They looked small. They looked scared. And for the first time all night, they looked like they realized they had lost control. The doors slammed shut, sealing me inside with the medic. The siren wailed and the ambulance lurched forward. The medic looked down at me and pulled the oxygen mask slightly away from my face. "You can relax now, sir," he said. We secured the sample from the kitchen while the police were securing the perimeter. My partner grabbed the bowl from the trash. "We have the evidence." I closed my eyes, letting the tears finally fall. I was alive. I was safe. But as the ambulance sped through the dark streets of Atlanta, I knew the real work was just beginning. I had survived the poison. Now I had to become the poison. The hospital room smelled of bleach and cold air conditioning, a sterile scent that did nothing to mask the underlying odor of sickness. I lay perfectly still in the narrow bed. My eyes closed, my breathing shallow and rhythmic. The wires from the heart monitor tugged gently at my chest, and the machine emitted a steady hypnotic beep that served as the metronome for my performance. Reggie had arranged everything perfectly. The doctor who admitted me was on his payroll, a man who knew how to keep a secret and how to stage a coma. I was supposed to be unconscious, a man hovering between life and death after a massive cardiac event. To anyone watching, I was a vegetable. To the camera hidden in the smoke detector above the bed, I was bait. The heavy door to the room creaked open. I did not flinch. I heard the click of high heels on the linoleum floor. Tiffany. Then the scuff of rubber soles. Tyson. They did not speak at first. They did not rush to my bedside to hold my hand. They did not ask the nurse who had conveniently stepped out if I was going to make it. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rustling of fabric. "Check the door," Tiffany whispered, her voice sharp and impatient. "Make sure nobody is coming." "It is clear," Tyson muttered. I felt a presence loom over me. It was not a comforting presence. It felt like a vulture circling a carcass. I felt hands on my body, but they were not checking for a fever. They were patting down the pockets of my canvas coat, which hung on the back of the chair next to the bed. I heard the Velcro of my wallet ripping open. $40, Tiffany hissed, her tone dripping with contempt. $40 and a Blockbuster card from 2004. Jesus, Tyson, your father lived like a pauper. Where is the rest of it? Where are the bank cards? He keeps cash in a coffee can under the sink, Tyson whispered back. He never trusted banks with his day-to-day money. You know that. Pathetic, she spat. I heard the leather of my wallet being tossed onto the side table. Well, it does not matter. The cash is peanuts compared to the real prize. Get the paper. We need to do this before he wakes up or dies. I lay there, my heart rate remaining steady through sheer force of will, listening to the rustle of stiff paper being unfolded. It sounded like heavy stock official. This is it, Tyson said, his voice trembling slightly. The general power of attorney. I downloaded the template this morning. It gives us control over everything. Medical decisions, real estate, bank accounts. If we get this executed, we can liquidate his assets before the probate courts even get a whiff of a death certificate. But he cannot sign it, Tiffany snapped. Look at him. He is out cold. That is why we brought the ink pad, Tyson said. Section 4, paragraph 3. A signature by mark or fingerprint is valid if the subject is physically unable to sign due to medical incapacity, provided it is witnessed. And who is the witness, Tiffany asked. I am, Tyson said. And you are. We will just say he was awake for a second, lucid enough to nod, and we helped him guide his hand. Who is going to argue with the grieving son and daughter-in-law? The logic was terrifyingly sound. It was also highly illegal. I felt the mattress depress as Tiffany sat on the edge of the bed. I focused on keeping my eyelids still fighting the urge to clench my jaw. Give me the pad, she ordered. I felt her hand grab my right wrist. Her skin was cold and clammy. She lifted my arm. It was dead weight, heavy and limp. I made sure of that. She maneuvered my hand toward the small plastic case she must have placed on the bedside table. Open his hand, she commanded Tyson. He is making a fist. I was not making a fist intentionally. It was the natural resting state of a hand that had held hammers and wrenches for 50 years. My joints were stiff with arthritis, something Tyson would have known if he ever bothered to ask how I was doing. Tyson grabbed my fingers and pried them open. He was not gentle. He pulled my index finger and thumb apart, forcing my hand flat. Hold it steady, Tiffany hissed. She grabbed my thumb. She did not just guide it, she twisted it. She bent the joint backward, forcing the pad of my thumb down onto the ink sponge. I felt the wet, cold sensation of the ink. Press harder, she said. We need a clear print. She dug her fingernails into the back of my hand, leveraging her weight to mash my thumb into the ink. The pain was sharp and sudden. She was bending my thumb so far back I felt the tendons strain. It took every ounce of discipline I had learned in the jungles of Vietnam not to recoil, not to snatch my hand back and strike her. I remained a statue. Okay, bring the paper here, she said. I felt the paper brush against my arm. She lifted my inky thumb and slammed it down onto the document. She rolled it side to side, grinding my skin against the fiber of the paper to ensure the ridges of my print transferred. One more, she said, just to be safe. On the second page. She repeated the process. This time she was even rougher. She twisted my wrist at an awkward angle. I felt a pop in my joint. Pain shot up my arm, hot and electric. I let out a low, involuntary groan, a sound that could easily be mistaken for the moan of a dying man. He is making noise, Tyson said, panic rising in his voice. Hurry up. I am hurrying, she snapped. There. Done. She dropped my hand. It flopped onto the sheets, throbbing. I could feel the sticky ink drying on my skin, a mark of their crime. Wipe it off, Tyson said. If the nurse sees the ink, she will know. Use the wet wipes, Tiffany said. She scrubbed my thumb with a rough alcohol-soaked cloth. She did not care if it stung. She rubbed until my skin was raw and red, erasing the evidence from my body. but the evidence on that paper was permanent, and the evidence on the camera recording their every move was eternal. I lay there listening to them shuffle the papers back into a folder. They stood by the foot of the bed looking down at me. I was no longer a person to them. I was a signature. I was a transaction that had just cleared. "So what is the plan now?" Tyson asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We wait," Tiffany said. Her voice was calm, chillingly so. "We wait for the doctor to come back. We tell him we have the power of attorney and we want to discuss end-of-life options." "End-of-life options," Tyson repeated. "You mean pulling the plug?" "He is suffering, Tyson," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Look at him. He is practically gone already. Why drag it out?" We show them the paper, we take control, and we make the compassionate decision to let him go. Then we list the house. "How much do you think we can get for it?" Tyson asked. "I looked up the comps in the neighborhood," Tiffany replied. "The area is gentrifying fast. Developers are buying up these old lots for cash. The house itself is garbage, obviously. It smells like old man and sawdust. But the land, that is a double lot on a corner. We could get $2 million for it easily. Maybe 2.5 if we start a bidding war." $2 million, Tyson breathed. "That clears the debt. That pays off Viper Capital. That buys us the condo in Buckhead." "Exactly," Tiffany said. $2 million, Tyson, and all we have to do is wait for his heart to stop beating. Honestly, he is doing us a favor by dying now. If he had lingered for years, he would have drained that equity with medical bills. This is the best-case scenario. I listened to them divvy up my life. They talked about my truck as scrap metal. They talked about my tools as junk to be hauled away. They talked about my home, the home where I had rocked Tyson to sleep as a baby, as nothing more than a dirt lot waiting for a bulldozer. They did not know about the commercial buildings. They did not know about the investment accounts. They did not know that the house they were so eager to sell was already placed in an irrevocable trust for a charity that built schools in developing nations. They knew nothing. And they did not know that the man lying in the bed, the man they were planning to euthanize for a payday, was wide awake. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the death of the last shred of fatherly affection I held for Tyson. He was standing there, nodding along as his wife planned my execution, salivating over the price tag of my grave. "Okay," Tiffany said, clapping her hands together softly. "Let us go find the doctor. We need to get this moving. Put on your sad face, baby. It is showtime." They walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I opened my eyes. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the dots. $2 million. That was my price. That was what my life was worth to them. I slowly lifted my right hand. My thumb was red and swollen. There were still traces of black ink in the creases of my fingerprint. I looked at the camera hidden in the smoke detector, and I let my lips curl into a snarl that would have terrified them if they had seen it. They wanted a quick death. They wanted a payout. I was going to give them a payout, all right, but it was not going to be in dollars. It was going to be in suffering. I reached for the nurse call button and pressed it 3 times. The signal for Reggie. It was time to wake up. It was time to come back from the dead and show these children what a real ghost looks like. They wanted the house. They wanted the money. They were going to lose everything. And I was going to enjoy watching it burn. 3 days later, I was wheeled out of St. Jude's Medical Center looking like a shell of a man. Reggie had outdone himself with the paperwork and the medical theater. According to the charts, I had suffered a massive ischemic stroke that left me hemiplegic and aphasic. I sat slumped in the wheelchair, my head lolling heavily to the left, a line of drool carefully engineered with a sip of water trickling from the corner of my slack mouth. My eyes were glassy and unfocused, staring at nothing but seeing everything. Tyson stood at the reception desk signing the final custody papers. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but there was a glint of victory in them that made my stomach turn. He had the power of attorney, he had the medical discharge, and now he had the body. He wheeled me out to the curb where his leased BMW was idling. He did not bring my truck. He grunted as he manhandled me into the passenger seat, treating me like a sack of mulch rather than his father. He did not even bother to buckle my seatbelt. As we drove, I watched the familiar streets of my neighborhood pass by. I expected him to turn left onto Oak Creek Lane toward my house, toward my sanctuary and my things. Instead, he turned right, heading for the highway. We were going to the suburbs. We were going to his house. He was not taking me home to recover. He was taking me to prison. When we pulled into his driveway, Tiffany was waiting on the porch. She did not look happy to see me. She looked at me with open revulsion, crossing her arms over her chest as Tyson dragged me out of the car. He practically carried me to the front door, his breathing heavy and labored. I made myself dead weight, letting my limbs hang loose and heavy. "Do not bring him in here," Tiffany snapped, blocking the entrance with her body. "I just had the carpets cleaned, Tyson. If he has an accident on the rug, I will kill you. He smells like hospital and old age." "Where am I supposed to put him?" Tyson asked, struggling to keep me upright. "The guest room is set up for your mother when she visits. Put him downstairs." "The basement," Tyson said. "It is unfinished, Tiff. It is freezing down there. It is 50 degrees. "Put a space heater down there," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "He is paralyzed, Tyson. He will not know the difference. Besides, it is easier to clean up the mess on concrete than it is on hardwood. Just get him out of my sight." Tyson sighed, but he did not argue. He dragged me through the kitchen past the warmth of the oven and the smell of roasting chicken and opened the narrow door to the basement. A blast of cold, damp air hit my face. It smelled of wet earth, rotting cardboard, and neglect. The stairs were steep and wooden. He half carried, half slid me down into the darkness. He deposited me in the corner of the room on a stained mattress that looked like it had been dragged in from the curb. There were no windows. The walls were bare cinder block, weeping with moisture. In the corner, a sump pump hummed intermittently, a mechanical heartbeat in the gloom. He threw a thin, scratchy wool blanket over me. It smelled of mothballs and dog hair. "Stay here, Dad," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "I will bring you some food later." He turned and ran up the stairs, slamming the door behind him. The lock clicked. I was alone in the dark, while above me, I could hear the muffled sounds of their life. The television blaring, the clinking of wine glasses, the laughter. They were celebrating my incarceration in the dungeon of a house I was paying for. I waited until I was certain they were settled for the night. The floorboards above ceased their creaking and the house settled into silence. Slowly I sat up. I wiped the fake drool from my chin and stretched my neck, rolling my shoulders to work out the stiffness from hours of playing the cripple. The cold was biting, seeping through the thin hospital gown and the flannel shirt Tyson had hastily dressed me in. I reached into the hidden pocket sewn into the lining of my pants, a modification I had made years ago for carrying large sums of cash on job sites. I pulled out a small black device no larger than a pack of gum. It was a high-fidelity voice recorder capable of capturing a whisper from across a room. I pressed the record button and set it on a crate beside the mattress, hiding it under a pile of old newspapers. Then I pulled out my phone, shielding the screen's glow with the blanket. I had 1 bar of signal. Enough. I opened my secure messaging app and typed a message to Reggie. "The Eagle has landed. Conditions are subhuman. Proceed with Phase 2. Freeze their assets tomorrow morning. I want them to wake up to a declined card." I put the phone away and lay back down on the filthy mattress. I stared up at the exposed floor joists of the main level. I could see the plumbing pipes, the electrical wiring, the guts of the house. I knew exactly how this house was built because I had reviewed the inspection report when Tyson bought it. I knew where the weak points were. I knew where the leaks would start. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I listened. I recorded. And I plotted. They thought they had buried me in the dark. They did not realize they had just planted a seed. And tomorrow the roots would start to strangle them. The rumble of the garage door opening and the subsequent fade of the BMW engine down the street was my signal. I lay still for exactly 3 minutes, counting the seconds in my head, just as I used to count the cure time on concrete. When I was certain they were gone, I sat up. My back screamed in protest from the cold floor, but I ignored it. The frail stroke victim vanished. In his place stood Cyrus Blackwood, master contractor. I walked to the basement stairs, my steps silent and sure. The door at the top was locked, a simple privacy knob meant to keep toddlers and unwanted guests out. Tyson had never been handy. He did not understand that a lock is only as strong as the frame it sits in. I found a stiff piece of wire in a box of discarded Christmas ornaments in the corner. I bent the tip into a small hook. I ascended the stairs and knelt by the keyhole. It took me less than 10 seconds. I felt the tumblers shift the spring compress. With a soft click, the knob turned. I pushed the door open and stepped into the kitchen. The house was quiet. I moved quickly, avoiding the creaky floorboards I had noted during my previous forced entry. My target was the home office down the hall. The door was solid oak, a veneer of quality hiding cheap particle board. It was locked too. I pulled a thin plastic loyalty card from my hidden pocket. I slid it between the door and the jamb, feeling for the latch bolt. I applied pressure, angled the card, and pushed. The door popped open. I was in. I sat down in Tyson's oversized leather executive chair. It squeaked under my weight. The desk was a disaster zone, a chaotic sprawl of unopened envelopes and crumpled paper. It was the workspace of a man drowning. I started with the stack of mail on the left. Past due. Final notice. Collections. I pushed those aside and found a manila envelope buried under a pile of car magazines. I opened it. Inside was a letter from the bank where Tyson claimed to be a vice president. It was a termination notice dated 2 years ago. He had not been laid off. He had been fired for gross negligence and failure to follow compliance protocols. 2 years. He had been waking up every morning, putting on a suit and leaving the house to pretend to work for 2 years. I felt a pang of pity that was quickly extinguished by the next document I found. It was a credit card statement for a Platinum Amex. The balance was staggering. $80,000. I found another for a Visa, $50,000. In total, I found statements for 6 different cards. The total debt was nearly $300,000. I scanned the transaction logs. It was a catalog of narcissism. $3,000 for a handbag at Louis Vuitton, $500 for a dinner at Nobu, weekend trips to resorts in the Caribbean, spa treatments, leased luxury cars. They were living like royalty on borrowed dimes. They were not just broke, they were destitute, they were insolvent, and they were funding this charade by bleeding me dry. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. It was locked, but the mechanism was cheap zinc. I braced my foot against the desk leg and gave the drawer a sharp yank. The wood splintered and the drawer slid open. Inside, there was a single red folder. The label on the tab sent a jolt of recognition through me. Viper Capital. I knew that name. I knew it very well. I opened the folder and my breath hitched in my throat. It was a high-interest, short-term loan agreement, a hard money loan. $50,000 cash with an interest rate that bordered on criminal, weekly compounding, aggressive collection clauses. It was the kind of loan you took when the banks laughed you out of the room. But it was the collateral section that made my vision blur with red rage. Listed there in black and white was the property address, 422 Oak Creek Lane, my house, my paid-off home. And at the bottom of the page was a signature, Cyrus Blackwood. It was a forgery, a shaky, pathetic attempt to mimic the signature I had used on Tyson's report cards and birthday checks. They had stolen my identity. They had mortgaged the roof over my head to a predatory lender to pay for their vanity. They had signed my name to a contract that could leave me homeless. I traced the ink of the forgery with my finger. It was recent. They must have done this weeks ago. This was why they needed me dead. The first payment was likely due, and they had no way to pay it without my life insurance. I closed the folder. My hands were steady now. The anger had crystallized into something cold and hard. They had made a deal with the devil. They just did not know that the devil was standing in their office. I pulled my phone from my pocket the moment I heard the office door click shut behind me. My hand was steady, but my heart hammered against my ribs like a sledgehammer striking iron. I dialed Reggie. He answered on the first ring, his voice crisp and professional. "Status?" he asked. "Viper Capital," I said, keeping my voice low. "They owe Viper Capital 50 grand, and they used my house as collateral with a forged signature on a high-interest note." There was a pause on the line, then a low, dry chuckle that sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Reggie, what is funny?" I asked, irritation spiking. "Cyrus," he said, "you really do not look at the quarterly reports for the Diversified Risk Fund, do you?" "I pay you to look at them," I snapped. "Viper Capital is a shell company for Blackwood Holdings," Reggie said. "We acquired their portfolio 6 months ago as a distressed asset. It is your money, Cyrus. You are lending money to yourself." The irony hit me like a physical blow. I almost laughed. My son was stealing from me to pay a loan shark that was actually me. I was the predator and the prey, so I own the debt. I asked just to be sure. "You own the debt, you own the paper, and you own the sharks," Reggie confirmed. "Good," I said, feeling a cold smile stretch across my face. "Take off the leash. I want you to have the collection team call Tyson. Use the scary voice. Tell him the note has been called. Tell him he has 24 hours to pay the full 50,000 or they are seizing assets." "And Reggie?" "Yes, boss." Tell him personal safety cannot be guaranteed. That is brutal, Cyrus. Reggie noted. He tried to kill me with sweet potato pie, Reggie, I said. Brutal is just the beginning. I made my way back down to the basement just minutes before I heard the garage door rumble open. I arranged myself on the mattress, adjusting my limbs into the familiar broken posture of the stroke victim. I let my mouth go slack and stared blankly at the damp cinder block wall. Above me, I heard the heavy footsteps of Tyson and the sharp click of Tiffany's heels. They were arguing before they even fully entered the house. "We have to sell the jewelry," Tyson was saying, his voice high and tight. "It is the only way." "We are not selling my jewelry," Tiffany shrieked. "Those are my assets." Then the phone rang. Not the house phone. Tyson's cell. It rang loud and shrill, cutting through their argument like a knife. The silence that followed was heavy. "Hello," Tyson answered. His voice was small, trembling. I listened as the color likely drained from his face. I could imagine the voice on the other end. Reggie's head of security, a man named Marcus, who sounded like gravel grinding in a blender. "What do you mean, immediately?" Tyson squeaked. "The contract said no, please. I need more time." "My father, he is." He listened for a moment, then gasped a sound of pure terror. "Tonight, I cannot get 50,000 by tonight. Please, we have a house. It is worth 2 million. We just need to liquidate." He was cut off. The call ended. I heard a sound like a phone being dropped onto a granite counter. "They called the note," Tyson whispered. His voice carried through the floorboards, thin and terrified. "Viper. They said the signature looks suspect. They said they are auditing the collateral. They want the cash, Tiffany. Tonight. Or they are sending a team." "A team." Tiffany's voice pitched up an octave. "Like hitmen. Like breakers," Tyson said. "They said personal safety is not guaranteed." "Oh my God. They know about the forgery. If they find out the house is not mine legally yet, they will kill us. We are dead. We are actually dead." "Shut up," Tiffany yelled. "Stop panic spiraling. We need money. Where can we get money?" "We do not have any," Tyson screamed back. "You spent it all. The credit cards are maxed. The bank accounts are overdrawn. We have nothing." The argument exploded. It was a symphony of blame. "This is your fault," Tyson yelled. "You had to have the Mercedes. You had to have the renovation. You bled me dry." "My fault," Tiffany screeched. "You are the one who lost his job 2 years ago and was too much of a coward to tell anyone. You are the one pretending to be a banker while you play video games at Starbucks. I am the one keeping up appearances. Appearances do not pay the shark." I heard stomping. The basement door flew open. Light flooded down the stairs, blinding me. Tyson stomped down the wooden steps, his face red and sweaty, his eyes wild. Tiffany followed him, looking like a cornered rat. They stood over me. I did not move. I did not blink. "Look at him," Tyson spat, kicking the mattress near my leg. "Just lying there, useless. He has millions in equity sitting in that house, and he is just breathing air." "He is the reason we are in this mess," Tiffany hissed. She leaned down, her face inches from mine. I could smell the wine on her breath. "If you had just died," she whispered, her voice venomous. "If you had just had the decency to die in that hospital bed, we would be rich right now. We would be safe." She slapped my cheek. It was not a hard slap, but it was stinging. It was disrespectful. "Do something," she screamed at my unmoving face. "Die, die, so we can sell your house." Tyson grabbed her arm. "Stop it. He does not understand. He is a vegetable. He is a stubborn old mule," she said, straightening up, "and he is going to get us killed." "Maybe," Tyson said, looking at me with a dark, desperate glint in his eyes that I had never seen before. "Maybe he can still help us, just not the way he intended." "What do you mean?" Tiffany asked. "If Viper wants money," Tyson muttered, staring at my chest, "maybe we can give them something worth money. Or maybe we just need him to disappear so we can claim the insurance faster. No more waiting for nature. We need to accelerate the timeline." They looked at each other. The fear in the room shifted. It was not just panic anymore. It was resolve. They turned and went back up the stairs, locking the door behind them. I lay in the dark, my cheeks still stinging from her slap. They thought they were trapped. They did not know they were locked in a cage with the zookeeper. And I had just decided it was feeding time. The air in the basement grew heavy, not just with the damp chill of the earth, but with the suffocating weight of desperation. Tyson and Tiffany had returned. They paced the small concrete square like caged animals, their shadows dancing frantically against the cinder blocks under the single flickering bulb. The threat from the collection agency had cracked something vital inside them. Civilization was peeling away layer by layer, leaving behind raw, primal fear. Tyson was muttering to himself, gnawing on his fingernails until they bled. 50,000. We need 50,000 by morning or they send the breakers. We are dead, Tiffany. We are dead. Tiffany stopped pacing. She stood over me, her silhouette looming large and distorted. She looked at my unmoving body with a cold, clinical detachment that was far more terrifying than her earlier rage. She was no longer angry. She was calculating. She was appraising me not as a father-in-law, but as a collection of biological assets. We are not dead, Tyson, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. We just need to be creative. We have a resource right here that we are not utilizing. Tyson looked at her, confused. What do you mean? The house. We cannot sell the house without his signature, and the forgery will take too long to process if Viper is watching. Not the house, you idiot, she snapped. Him. The meat. Tyson recoiled as if she had physically struck him. What are you talking about? Tiffany crouched down, her face inches from mine. I could smell the stale wine and the sharp metallic tang of her fear. I heard a story once, she whispered, her eyes darting over my body. My friend in med school knew a guy. They pay top dollar for viable organs in Mexico. Kidneys, livers, corneas, even skin grafts. He is old, but he is healthy. His heart is weak, sure, but the rest of him is worth money. Tyson gagged. You want to chop him up? You want to sell my father for parts? Are you insane, Tiff? That is monster talk. Tiffany stood up and backhanded him across the face. The sound was loud and wet, echoing off the concrete walls. Tyson stumbled back, clutching his cheek. Wake up, she screamed. There are men coming to break our legs and burn this house down. Do you think they care about morality? Do you think they care about your daddy issues? We are talking about survival, Tyson. Us or him. And look at him. She kicked the mattress by my head. He is a vegetable. He is checking out anyway. We are just recycling. We drive him across the border tonight. I make a call. We hand him over. We come back with 50 grand in cash. The debt is gone. We are free, and nobody will ever know. We just say he wandered off. We say the stroke made him confused and he got lost in the woods. It happens all the time. Tyson looked from her to me. I saw the battle in his eyes, the last shred of his conscience fighting against his cowardice. He looked at my gray face, my slack jaw, my lifeless limbs. He looked at his wife, the woman who controlled his every breath. Then he looked at the door where the imaginary hitmen were waiting. He slumped his shoulders. How do we get him there? He whispered, his voice broken. We load him in the trunk, Tiffany said, a cruel smile spreading across her face, just like luggage. I lay there and felt the last tether of familial bond snap. It did not break with a bang, but with a silent, mournful sigh. They were not just greedy. They were not just entitled. They were predators. They had crossed the line from bad children to monsters. The sweet potato pie had been an attempt at a clean, quiet murder, a mercy killing in their twisted minds. But this was butchery. This was desecration. They were planning to hollow me out like a pumpkin and sell the seeds. I realized then that my plan to simply scare them, to teach them a lesson about money and gratitude, was insufficient. You do not teach a lesson to a rabid dog. You put it down. This was no longer a game of chess. This was war, total and absolute. I felt the cold concrete against my back and made a silent vow to the son I had once loved. You want to sell me for parts, Tyson? You want to trade my life for your freedom? I am going to strip you of everything. I am going to take your freedom, your future, and your name. You will wish the hitmen had found you. You will wish you had never opened that basement door. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing, waiting for them to leave to make their preparations. They thought I was the cargo. They did not know I was the bomb, and the timer had just hit 0. The transition from the tomb of the basement to the main floor was jarring, not because of the warmth, but because of the noise. The house was vibrating with the heavy bass of music that did not belong in a residential neighborhood, and the air was thick with the smell of cheap cologne and desperation. Tyson and Tiffany had dragged me up the stairs an hour earlier. They had stripped off my hospital gown and forced my stiff limbs into an old suit of mine they had dug out of storage. It was moth-eaten and smelled of cedar and neglect, but it was necessary for their charade. They planted me in a wheelchair they must have rented or stolen and parked me in the corner of the living room like a piece of avant-garde furniture. I sat there, my head lolling to the side, my eyes half open, observing the carnival of vultures they had invited into my home. These were not friends. These were not neighbors coming to offer casseroles and condolences. These were sharks. I recognized the type immediately from my years in the business. Hard money lenders looking for a quick flip. Unlicensed real estate wholesalers who preyed on distress. Pawn shop owners who did not ask for receipts. Tyson and Tiffany were hosting a fire sale and I was the inventory. They were desperate to raise the $50,000 for Viper Capital before the sun came up, and they were willing to sell anything that was not nailed down, including the deed to my house, which lay on the coffee table amidst a sea of empty beer bottles and half-eaten appetizers. I watched Tyson work the room. He was sweating through his shirt, his eyes darting nervously toward the door every few minutes, expecting the hitmen to kick it down. He was trying to sell my tools, my truck, and even the copper wiring out of the walls to a man with a gold tooth and a snakeskin jacket. "I will give you $5 grand for the truck and the tools," the man said, laughing as he tapped ash onto the carpet. $5 grand, Tyson squeaked. "The truck alone is worth 20. "Not without a title and not fast," the man sneered. "You want cash tonight or do you want to negotiate?" Tyson took the cash. My heart burned, but I did not move. But the real horror was Tiffany. She was holding court by the fireplace, wearing a dress that was far too short, and holding a glass of wine that was far too full. She was introducing me to people not as her father-in-law, but as an asset. "This is the golden goose," she slurred, gesturing to me with her glass. "The doctors say he could go any day now. Stroke took out everything upstairs. He is just a body waiting for a signature." A man I did not recognize walked over to me. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Tyson made in a year, but he wore it like a costume. He smelled of expensive scotch and rot. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could see the broken capillaries in his nose. "So this is the old man holding up the deal," he said, blowing smoke into my face. He poked me in the chest hard with a finger adorned with a heavy gold ring. "Hey, Pops! You in there? Can you hear me?" I stared past him, my gaze fixed on a water stain on the ceiling. I let a line of drool escape my lips. "Gross!" The man laughed, straightening up. He looked at Tiffany. "You said he was compliant. He looks disgusting. He is harmless." Tiffany laughed, walking over. "Watch." She stood in front of me. The room went quiet. The sharks smelled blood. They wanted to see the show. They wanted to see just how broken the old man was. Tiffany dipped her finger into her wine glass and flicked red droplets onto my face. "Wake up, Cyrus," she sang. "It is a party." The guests laughed. It was a cruel braying sound. Encouraged, she took a sip of wine and then deliberately tilted her glass. A stream of dark red liquid poured onto the lap of my suit, soaking through the fabric, staining the white shirt underneath. It looked like a gunshot wound. It looked like blood. "Oops," she giggled, pretending to cover her mouth. My hand slipped. "Look at him. He does not even care. He likes it. He is probably thirsty." She poured the rest of the glass over my head. The wine ran down my forehead into my eyes, stinging and blurring my vision. It dripped off my nose and chin onto the floor. I sat there drenched in alcohol and humiliation while 20 strangers laughed at my degradation. "Someone snap a picture," the man in the snakeskin jacket yelled. "Send it to the nursing home. Tell them he comes pre-marinated." Tyson stood in the corner watching. He did not laugh. But he did not step forward either. He took a long drink from his bottle and looked away, unable to watch his wife baptize his father in mockery. He was a coward. A complicit, spineless coward. I did not wipe the wine from my eyes. I did not blink. I let the liquid sting. I let it burn, because that burn was fuel. I used the blur of the wine to mask the movement of my eyes as I scanned the room. I was not a vegetable. I was a camera. I was a recording device. I was cataloging every face in that room. I memorized the man with the gold tooth. I knew him. He ran a chop shop in the South District. I memorized the man in the expensive suit. He was a disbarred lawyer known for facilitating fraudulent deed transfers. I memorized the woman in the corner eyeing my grandmother's china cabinet. She was a fence for stolen antiques. This was not a party. It was a gathering of the criminal underground, and my son had invited them into our lives. Every laugh, every insult, every drop of wine was being filed away in the steel trap of my mind. They thought they were mocking a helpless old man. They did not know they were providing a deposition for their own prosecution. I watched Tiffany refill her glass. She was glowing with the power of her cruelty. She felt untouchable. She thought she had won. She thought that by dehumanizing me, she made it easier to sell me off piece by piece. She did not realize that she was stripping away the last of my mercy. I focused on Tyson. I watched him take the envelope of cash from the chop shop owner. $5,000 for a lifetime of hard work. He shoved it into his pocket, looking sick. He knew this was wrong. He knew this was evil. But he did it anyway. That was his sin. The sin of weakness. I sat in my puddle of wine and watched the clock on the mantel. It was almost midnight. The deadline for the Viper Capital payment was approaching. The desperation in the room was about to spike. And that is when he would walk in. Reggie. I had timed the text perfectly earlier. I knew he would be waiting outside, watching the house, waiting for the signal to make his entrance. The stage was set. The villains were drunk and distracted. The victim was properly bloodied and bowed. It was time for the hero to arrive, not to save the day, but to close the trap. I looked at Tiffany one last time, laughing, spilling, preening. Enjoy the party, my dear, I thought. Drink deep, because the hangover you are going to have tomorrow will last for the rest of your life. You wanted to play with the big boys. You wanted to swim with sharks. Well, you are about to find out that there is something in the water much bigger and much hungrier than you. And he is sitting right in front of you, covered in wine, waiting for the bell to ring. The front door did not open with a knock or a ring. It swung inward with a heavy, deliberate slowness that commanded silence before the man even crossed the threshold. The bass from the stereo seemed to die in his presence. The chatter of the vultures ceased. Reggie King stepped into the foyer like a storm front rolling